Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Wednesday, November 4th. We just wrapped up our optional sessions this morning, so I just covered down on some of the content with some of the small groups and some of the individuals on centers of gravity and some of the confusion that surrounded that. We're moving into the next lesson, which is lesson 31, where we're going to talk specifically about lines of effort. Once again, I'm here in Ute Valley Park, my favorite park in town. I'm not riding my bike today, but I wanted to just get out somewhere beautiful and just let you guys know the beautiful parts in town. If you have any questions, I'm happy to help out with Ute Valley Park. Great place to bike, great place to hike, once you get released from quarantine, of course. So once again, today's video is going to be a little bit longer than I would normally like to have it, but I think it's necessary because based on feedback that I got this morning from some of you in class, still remain a lot of questions about what's going on and how we're going to move forward here. So just please bear with me. I would ask you to please listen up to the very end, because at the very end of the video, I will be sharing some key things and just some key reminders that I think will help all of us make sure we arrive at the same destination. So first of all, we are talking about, again, the final phase today of the operational design process. And hopefully we've done a good job. We've identified our national end states along with our military end states and objectives. We've identified the operational environment using the PMISI construct as kind of a template to help us walk through and identify what is going to be relevant in that environment for us. We've then used that data that we derive from what's going on to help identify problematic conditions that are keeping us from achieving our military end states and objectives, and then counter that with the desired conditions. We're really just kind of a cause and effect or an opposite relationship. Lastly, we then went into, or most recently, we went in and identified centers of gravity. That was yesterday's lesson. Ultimately bringing us to this point where we're talking about lines of effort. And this is now, once we have identified the things the commander needs to do to achieve the effects he wants in the battle space, and we kind of know where we're headed, we kind of have a plan in place, we start aligning ends, ways, and means. So we take our means, which is our end goal that we're trying to figure out, the ways, which is kind of how we're going to achieve that objective, if you will, and then finally the means, which is which is really the assets we're going to use to achieve those objectives. So ends, ways, means is kind of where we are right now. So we are going to identify a line of effort, and hopefully your groups will identify 3 or 4 lines of effort at this point. And I will wrap up at the end. I will show you guys what a decent slide might look like for your sense. So if you have questions, that's okay. We will get there. But we're going to really try to think about 3 or 4 lines of effort of how you're going to apply military force or military power on the continuum of the conflict spectrum. That could be hard power in terms of kind of what we do with our aircraft and Marines and Army troops. It could be on the other side where we do the organized or the training mission for security cooperation, where you maybe are training indigenous forces and helping them to establish a firm government. So it doesn't have to be a military action like you're thinking bombs on target, but we definitely want to develop our lines of effort to somehow use our military focus. This is not a political science class, so we're not going to be exercising the other elements of national power to include diplomacy and economic sanctions. That's not our job as a military. So provided those things have failed, that's the assumption we are making, we have been called in as military members to help solve this problem. Sorry, I hear some bikers and hikers in the background. It's a beautiful day. They're all out here. So to that end, we're going to really talk about lines of effort. You should have several lines of effort focused primarily on changing the battle space, so the adversary, against the adversary and his or her center of gravity. Likewise, you should probably develop a line of effort to help protect your center of gravity that you have identified. So that's something that commanders should really consider, is how do we protect what our key strength is and where we might be vulnerable. So you want to develop lines of effort in that sense. So the textbook talks about a number of things. They talk about lines of operations, or LOOs. We are not going to worry about that in this class for this concept. We are only going to talk about LOEs, or lines of effort. And really, you need to ask yourself, as you develop this line of effort, and hopefully down the road in the next couple weeks as we unpack this briefing more, you will identify, is my line of effort going to be focused, is it going to be a direct approach or an indirect approach against the center of gravity? if you are targeting the center of gravity directly, like the adversary's navy is their center of gravity, and you are going directly after their ships, that is what you call a direct approach. An indirect approach, however, might have been revealed in your Carver analysis from the COG lesson the other day, where you've isolated and identified a clear vulnerability in that naval, and maybe it's the petroleum sites that are used to fuel the naval vessels. And instead of going after the Navy directly, you're going to go indirect attack, and you're going to attack a vulnerability of that center of gravity, thereby rendering the entire COG functionless or purposeless. That is an indirect approach. So as you develop your lines of effort, begin thinking about whether it's a direct or an indirect approach. Likewise, you'll hear the textbook talk a lot about MOEs and MOPs. Those are measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. We are not going to focus on those a lot, but I would like to take a moment just to share with you what those are, because I think they're relevant. As an example, and I'm thinking of this in my head real time, so forgive me if it kind of goes awry. But if you're a commander in a region and you are trying to get rid of improvised explosive devices, as an example, maybe your measure of performance might be, we are going to clean up all the streets. We are going to have 100% of the garbage along the streets cleaned up. Because often insurgents will put these hidden bombs in garbage piles, and they will obscure them with things. They will bury them on the ground and cover it up with an old piece of garbage, thereby hiding it. And we want to eliminate the opportunity they have to hide these things very readily. So our measure of performance would be, we want 100% of all the streets cleaned. Okay, so let's say you're the commander and you have successfully achieved that objective. You have 100% of the city streets in the adversary place completely clean, but the IED attacks do not decrease. So that is a measure of effect. You're actually seeing, is what we are doing actually impacting the bottom line? So measure performance is something you do with the intent of achieving an objective, and the measure of effect is kind of how effective that is. So you might have 100% of the streets clean with 0 decrease in your IED attacks. So that leads the commander to believe that, okay, he needs to come up with a different measure of performance. So that's kind of what that concept is, and you will see those terms perhaps later in your active duty careers. I want to kind of share that with you and help you understand that a touch. Okay, so let's take a pause here. We are now 7-8 minutes into the video, and I do want to share with you a couple things. Many of you have had questions on what does this slide look like, and I want to be clear. This is an example of just a slide. The text is irrelevant, but kind of the format-wise, you can see what's going on here. There's a couple key points. You know, of course, we got the objectives, strategic and militarily, and this is not the best example, but I printed this off from something that was delivered by cadets last year. I would expect that a good slide in this context would have kind of a clear delineation between the military and national objectives and military and national end state. So however you want to arrange that to say a word picture of what you're doing. Of course, followed by that are the PMISI elements. These are things, we use the PMISI as a guideline, but these are the relevant factors that come into play in the environment, defining the operational environment. We know what our big picture guidance is now. Now we're trying to figure out kind of big picture, what kind of things we need to consider. That could be the adversaries have an extremely strong naval capacity. We have limited Army boots on the ground in the region. That's a constraint. Of course, all those things will help inform what we then identify as our problematic conditions and our desired conditions. So these should be opposites, and in this case, the cadet group came up with, 3 or 4 problematic conditions that are focused primarily, and I guess those are challenges to achieving the end state. Of course, we've got our center of gravity here, both the friendly and the adversary center of gravity. And then down here are lines of effort. You can see these kind of little lines where this is kind of just a broad sweeping brushstroke of what your military action is going to be. It could be a number of things, and I would encourage you to be creative. Use the textbook as an example. They use the example of an F-22 bombing a communications node, rendering the adversary's comm nodes totally ineffective. So that makes pretty good sense on the surface. Now, that being said, the other key point I want to highlight. So this is going to be due on Friday. by the end of the business day. Again, my goal is to take this over the weekend, review it, give you guys some very specific feedback that may shape and inform some gaps that you have in your current plan or some things that I still have questions on. And really, your goal in the next 2 weeks, we're gonna dig down layer by layer into the operational design process once again. And you'll have a full class day to dig in fully as a group on that stuff. And I would highly encourage you moving forward to plan on using your time that we have scheduled for class as an opportunity to dig in fully on what, and develop a slide deck that will be presented on or about Thanksgiving, that time frame. So to that point, I have posted a draft kind of template slide deck onto the Teams page, onto this Teams page. So you should be able to download that and see it. And I would encourage you as a group to begin working through that. You'll see there's a few slides devoted to the end states, a few slides devoted to PMISI, a few slides devoted to the problematic desired conditions, and then a whole few slides devoted to the COGS and the Carver analysis, etc. So I will give you more guidance as the weeks and days progress, but in the short term, I would highly recommend your group download that slide deck and maybe start populating a little bit with many of the notes you've been taking this past week on how you're going to deliver this briefing. And the intention is that you are a planner and you're delivering this briefing to me, a combatant commander, about a plan of how you're going to fix a problem in my AOR, or my region of responsibility. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're wrapping it up. We're at 11 and a half minutes. A few things just in summary. Number one, a slide like this, similar to this, in some capacity is going to be due from each group. One group member can send that to me or post it to the Teams page. I'll provide some guidance in my text here on this that I will share. But one of those is due on Friday, and it doesn't have to be during class time, but you should have been working towards this end for the last week and a half or so. So I'm not too worried about the fact that we are just now learning about lines of effort. Use that time on Friday as a group where we would normally be meeting as a class to work with your teammates and come up with a few lines of effort on how you are going to align ends, ways, and means to achieve, to transform, if you will, those problematic conditions into desired conditions, hopefully against the center of gravity that you've identified. Okay, next Tuesday, kind of a different topic, but that is going to be Tuesday, 10 November. That is going to be when the midterm essay is due. And you'll see on the Teams page, there's a place where you can drop that essay under the Assignments tab. And this should be very simple. Again, most of you have already written a 400-word response on the original test we had. I've since given that response back to you guys for those that have asked. And just brush it off, make sure it's tight, add a little more content, make it about 2 pages, about 500 words or so, and just submit that to the Teams page by Tuesday evening. And I will again clarify that in the narrative that I post here. And then finally, moving forward. So during these next 2 weeks, again, I will chime in for class time. I'll continue to record these videos. They will not be nearly as long as this, but I will take some time to identify problems that I'm seeing. Maybe some commonly misunderstood ideas that you guys have as a student. And during these next 2 weeks, you really have your sole singular focus in MSS 251 is to work with your teammates and develop this briefing. Again, that template is now posted. It's called the Operational Design Template or something like that, but that'll be posted. You guys should be cleaning that up, adding significant detail, preparing a briefing for presentation to the combatant commander, okay? Lastly, it's Wednesday right now. You're hopefully watching this on Friday or something, maybe on Thursday. But sometime this weekend, stand by for some words. But we're gonna try to cook some homemade cookies, me and my daughter and wife and kids. And I'm gonna try to rally up at the cadet area some point on Saturday and just say, hey, if you want some cookies and some treats, come by, say hi. My family won't be there, but I can be there. And just to check in, I just want to make sure you guys are doing okay. You're in a good headspace. I know there's a lot of stress with the elections, with classes, with the COVID stuff, the lockdown you guys have been put into. So I recognize that, and you are not alone in that capacity. And I really, really want you guys all to know that. This will end. I don't know when, and I don't know how long we'll be in this phase, but if you need anything, reach out to me, okay? Reach out to your peer advisor in your squadron. Reach out to your AOC, reach out to a chaplain, reach out to the military life counselors, reach out to the Peak Performance Center. But there are no shortage of people that are ready to listen to you, to include me, if you have something going on. So there's no shame in asking for help, and there's no shame to say that you are lonely and isolated and a little overwhelmed right now. I think that all of us can say there's some truth to that comment. So that's all. So Friday, this is due. Tuesday, we've got our short answer test, or the midterm essay due. Of course, for Friday, there's a last discussion post that's going to be due for today on Friday. And then stand by for guidance, but I'm planning on coming up to the cadet area and dropping off some treats for those that want to come out and get them. And I'll send more guidance in this narrative as well. 15-minute long video. I'm really sorry. I hate to take your time like that. But I hope all is well. Hang in there, guys. And it looks like the election is kind of wrapping up at this point, by the way, unrelated note. At least as of 2 o'clock or so on Wednesday, we don't yet know who our new president will be, but it looks like it's slowly resolving to one or the other. So keep your chin up, regardless of who you voted for, and hang in there. We will get through this. Thanks, guys.